a lot of people are going through life in an unsettling place, because they're unconsciously self-sabotaging. They're getting in their own way without even knowing it. Not having such a rigid mindset of like where I'd like to be or this path I'm trying to be on is how you live your best life.
Welcome to the Be Better broadcast. Today, we are speaking about a topic that is present in most everybody's life, at least at some point. And even when you get rid of this thing, it can creep its way back in when a life circumstance changes, or you have a career change, or a relationship change, whatever it is. And that topic is self-sabotage. Right when things are going great, we tend to push ourselves back. We tend to take a step back. And sometimes the crazy thing about self-sabotage is that it happens without you even realizing it. It's happening subconsciously. And you might have some people in your life who say, hey, Brandon, once you're at this pinnacle of success in this particular area, I've noticed that you shoot yourself in the foot. It's like when you have a bad relationship and then you get into a new relationship and things are going great and you start to mess things up and you might not even realize it, right? It's because of self-sabotage. So we're going to talk all about how you can stop self-sabotage in your life, how you can become aware of it, as well as specific strategies to implement that will help you to avoid it for the rest of your life. And to do that, it's not just me. We've got someone very special on the show. He reached out to the broadcast and he said, hey, I know that I'd bring a lot of value to this conversation. And that man is James Brackin himself. And for those who don't know James Brackin, James is the host of the Top 1% podcast, the You Can Too podcast. And he's a personal coach for entrepreneurs who helps them to get to the root of their self-sabotage so that they can reach their next level of life, both personally and professionally. And the super cool thing about James is we're actually local. We live within an hour of each other. We didn't even realize it. So we're going to be connecting, and I'm sure that you'll see him back on the show in the future as well. But when you take away even just one piece of value or one tidbit that helps you in some shape, way, or form from this conversation, all that we ask is you share this show with just one other person that you know who can use it as well. You are the reason the Be Better broadcast has grown to over 300 episodes, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. So without further ado, the man himself, James, it's great to have you on the show, brother.
Man, it is great to be here. You are a professional, and it shows, and I absolutely love it, man. I love what you're doing. I love the mission that you have, and massive congratulations on 300 and everything that you're doing, brother. I'm amped to be here.
I appreciate that, man. Let me say, I'm super impressed with you, and you have a skill of making people feel good about themselves. And that is a super valuable skill in every facet of life, but it explains how you're a podcast host with almost 200 episodes yourself.
Yeah.
And you just turned 20 years old, which blows my mind, because let me tell you something. I never listened to a podcast before the age of 21. I never read a personal development book until the age of 21. Like, I didn't even know that this world of self-growth existed before I was 21. And here you are having a successful podcast, working with book thinkers, like everything that you do with your clients. Like, it just blows my mind at the head start that you've been given. So I'm curious to hear from you, man. I want to talk about self-sabotage and how that's played a part in your life. But at 20 years old, like, you could be doing anything. Like, you could be in school, you could be, building a career with a specific company, like the corporate route. There's so many different ways you could have gone. Why a podcast? Why coaching other people? And how did you find yourself in this world of personal development?
Yeah, it's I'll try to make it short, because there's a lot of pivotal moments that brought me down this path. I think the core thing that I go back to, that I bring a lot of people up to, is that when I was young, I lost a lot of family growing up. My father and uncle both passed away at 37, and my grandfather passed away at 66. But that was the one that really hit me. I always say that hit me because I was a little bit older. I recognized the importance of mortality and how our life is just so precious, and sometimes we don't really treat it like it is. And so when my grandfather passed away, he passed away a few months before his retirement. Like, I remember my entire family, like, ready to go on a family trip. We'd never done it. And it was just like, this is going to be the thing where, my grandfather worked his entire life. This is going to be the time where we really enjoy and seep into that retirement and really allow ourselves to, enjoy that time. Passed away a few months before. And so that hit really deep. And it was like, man, like, I do not want to live a life, let alone an ordinary life, but a life that doesn't feel in alignment with me, and get to the end of my life, or the end of my job, of whatever I'm supposed to, as most of, the world is doing, is living a life that they're okay with, more so unsettled with, just to get to the end of, the job and not really enjoy retirement. You can't even get to it, kind of thing. And so that really seeped in for me. What I thought that was going to be was I knew college never made sense because I thought of, okay, I'm going to get this amount per hour. And that just never made sense in my mind. I think I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was about 16 or 17, and the understanding of being a worker rather than being like a self-employed kind of person, it just made more sense to me. And so, what the path I was gonna go down was become a real estate agent. And so, while everyone was getting ready for college, I was telling everybody I was about to be a real estate agent, and that was going to be the path that I was going to go down. And so, for 6 months plus, all I did was just like seat myself in that kind of information. I was taking the online course. I thought, well, how else can I get ahead so that when I turn 18, I can actually be like prepared and ready to go? I'm going to surround myself with those kind of people. So I went to Saratoga, if you know where that is, of course. And I started surrounding myself with people that were in real estate. And they looked at me like I was absolutely nuts. I was 17 years old, the youngest person they'd ever seen. And I was like, I'm ready to go. Like when I turn 18, I want to do this. A few weeks before I turned 18, I realized that really didn't feel in alignment with me. I wanted to be an investor, not an agent. I didn't want to work for the client. I wanted to be the client, really. And so I realized that. And of course, so much happened into stepping into coaching. And it was really not something that I expected, but that's a broad overview of how I'm kind of got to where I'm at now.
Wow, that's incredible. Let me ask you specifically, when did you recognize that you can work on yourself? Like, when did you recognize, wow, I can improve in my communication skills. I can improve in my physical fitness with my finances. Like, and when I ask you that, it sounds like a maybe even a stupid question, but when I was 21, I was making a lot of money in sales, but everything else was terrible. Like I was overweight. My relationships in my life were non-existent. I was a negative person. And then I discovered personal growth and I realized I can work on these things and get better. Like, was it experiencing loss at a young age that really shined that light for you? Or was it a different event that made you realize I can work on myself and get better? And it's not a matter of how old I am as much as it is a matter of how much time I spend working on myself.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it was a gradual thing where, like, growing up, yeah, I lost a lot of family growing up, and so I got into the victim mindset of like, this is happening to me, this is happening to me, depression, anxiety, all the things that, well, I think a lot of people go through when they're young, for sure. But the loss was something I didn't realize was something that was happening for me. So the thing that I always go back to is changing the questions that you ask yourself, right? Tony Robbins, anyone will say that you change the questions that you ask and you're going to get different answers. So for my entire life, the only thing I asked was, why is this happening to me? Lost every single father figure or any kind of man in my life was gone. And it just felt like, why is this happening to me? There was one day I asked, how is this happening for me?
Mm.
Brain automatically gave me a different answer. I tell people, like, you have to like think of your brain like it's chat GBT. Give it a different prompt. You're gonna get a different answer. And that's just how it works. So I asked that question. And so I started to like really seep into that, like think about that a little bit deeper. Like, how is this happening for me? Well, I live my life with more urgency now because I lost people growing up. Like, people, yeah, I'm 20, but I lost my father and uncle at 37. Like, how long do I really have, right? So taking that into perspective really gave me a different kind of perspective on how I wanted to live my life and the kind of the agency I wanted to have around living my life. And so, I mean, I was always into, I played baseball growing up. I've been lifting since, I don't know, I was 10, 12 years old. Like, it's always been a really big part of my life. And so that was the physical aspect. But I accidentally got into reading books. If I'm honest with you, man, like I took pride in not reading books growing up. Like, I did not read a book throughout, and literally high school, I didn't even read a book. And then I got out of it, and then I started tuning into podcasts, and then that led me into books, and I was like, "Oh, I can actually have books that I can actually improve myself." So it wasn't a stupid question because I think a lot of people believe that this is just my life, this is just who I am, I'm just this is what's supposed to happen, and I got involved with self-improvement, and I thought, "I can improve myself? Like, I can change the way I feel about myself? I can change the way that I live my life?" And man, that went down a rabbit hole, and I wish you could see all the books that I have, over there, but man, it's never ended since then.
Hell yeah. I love that. And that what you said about not knowing how much time you have and
Yeah.
losing your father when he was 37 years old, it's so true. And I say this all the time. Like, if I died now at 29, my son, who's only almost 5 months,
Yeah.
would be able to look back at this show and see his father speaking with these people and sharing these insights from all over the world that help people improve. He'll be able to go on the YouTube channel and see that. He'll be able to see the videos I posted me playing guitar. Like, he has all of this content that he can go back to and see and learn from his father, when I can't look at my father when he was 29 years old doing any of this. All he can do is verbally tell me stories. But if I didn't have him anymore, all I would have are very, very old, grainy pictures of him. But now we live in this world where we truly can make impact, not just in our local community, but impact across the world. And we have to ask ourselves the question, how can I create a positive impact so that if I am at death's door, I'll be able to look back and say that I did everything I could in order to live my life, in order to serve other people, and in order to make a difference. And that is really what lights a fire under my ass. And it's been that way since I started my business in 2019. When I was doing well in the corporate world, I'm in the highest levels of leadership, I'm training other leaders, but I'm asking myself, is this all I want to do? And that transition to me saying, well, I want to help people from all over, from many different companies, from many different places, many different states. And that started Be Better Industries, now where I help everyone. So the reason I share that is because you said the question, changing the question that you ask changes the answer that you receive. And I feel that it's hard to have awareness to change the question if you're not asking yourself a bad question in the first place. But when you are asking yourself, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? Your brain's probably saying, well, it's because of this and it's because of that. And it's because of all these reasons that aren't even true, because that voice in our head is always present. But we can change the narrative of that voice by asking that different, more powerful question. I love that the Chat GPT example that you gave. But let me ask you this question. So now you're 20 years old. When did you start your podcast, the You Can Too podcast?
I think it was November 2021.
Wow.
And I started in my car.
Really?
No microphone. Dude, I say this, and it's going to be something I really look back on, and I'm like, man, that's really crazy. I wish I documented it more because I don't have many pictures or anything like that. But man, I vividly remember, upstate New York, it's hot in the summer. It's a humid heat. And I vividly remember like times in the summer and even in the cold as well, where I would record a podcast and it would be either really too cold or too hot, where I'd record one and I'd go inside, like cool off or heat or warm up. And then I would go back in my car and then record another one because I didn't have a microphone. I didn't have a setup. I didn't have like Ethernet connected to my room. So I couldn't host anyone at the time. And it was like, I know this feels like this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I'm going to lean into this thing, even if I have no idea how it's going to turn out. And I look back now and, I'm not where I'd like to be. And of course, we're always going to be moving forward. But the fact that I'm speaking with people from some of these books behind me and I started in my car, I just think it's proof that people need to start doing things now.
It's so true. I love that. Let me ask you, 20 years of life, what has been your biggest learning over that 20 years? And I saw your episode recently where you share 20 things you've learned over the past 20 years of living. What would you say has been the greatest learning? And then everyone can go listen to the episode to hear the other 19 things. But what's number one, would you say?
Yeah, I think at my core, a thing that I'm continuously unlearning is I actually just read a book called Letting Go by David Hawkins. And I've been recommending it to so many people recently. I think I think we have this concrete idea in our mind that we're supposed to have it figured out, or like other people have it figured out. And I'm just like reinforcing this idea that I do not need to have it figured out. That I guess the mindset I'm trying to live my life through is that the purpose of life is to enjoy the passage of time. Because I think a lot of people get in this mindset of, when I get this, I'll be happy. When I get this job, I'm going to be happy. When I get that car, I'm going to be happy. When I achieve this relationship or this kind of lifestyle, we over glamorize what we think that we want to such an extreme extent that we miss out on our actual life that we're currently experiencing. It's kind of like when you're looking at everything that you want, you stray away from everything that you have. And so really sitting and seeping into the mindset that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And the whole purpose of my life is to enjoy the passage of time. There's no place I'm going to get to. There's no thing I'm going to accomplish that's ever going to replace where I'm at right now. I would say that that's something that's been really staying in my mind for sure.
It's just so interesting because both are so important, right? It's really important to know where you want to go.
Yeah.
And it's also important to realize that you can love where you are right now. I'm reading a book called The Mastery of Life by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
And he has so many amazing books. You've probably read some. The Four Agreements is a great one.
I got one. Yeah, right over there. You can't see it, but I have it.
That's awesome. Yeah, cool. So excellent author. I just love the way he writes. Some people can just put thoughts into words in a way that no one else can. He's one of those people.
Yeah.
And he talks exactly about that. He says there's conditional love for, and by the way, this is conditional love for ourselves and others. But speaking of love for ourselves, because that's what you just brought up. Conditional love is saying, when I hit 1 million downloads, or when I help 500 clients, or when I make $1 million, then I'll love myself.
Mm-hmm.
Versus unconditional love, which is I love myself. Removing the if then statement, right? When you remove the if then you love yourself, and you can still go after all these amazing things. So having that unconditional love while we're pursuing these goals and dreams is super important, because like, obviously you're a Tony Robbins fan. Tony Robbins was probably one of the most giant influences on me when I read Awaken the Giant Within. It's one of the first books I read, personal development. And I was like, damn, this guy is another person who can put thoughts into words in a way no one else can. But he mentions when he was in his 20s, he also had a goal of, by the time I'm in my 20s to 30, I want to help individual people. And then when I'm between 30 and 40, I want to help small groups of people. And then when I'm between 40 and 50, I want to help even larger groups of people. And then when I'm between 50 and 60 and on, I might want to become president of the United States. Like, those were his initial goals. And he's like, now, obviously things have changed and it didn't work out exactly the way that I wanted it to, but he said it was super important to have those stakes in the ground of where he wanted to be at certain points. And if you look at his career, it's been pretty consistent to that. Like, yeah, he was helping a lot of people in his 20s and 30s too, but it's only become more. And he hasn't run for president yet, although I think that'd be a fantastic idea. I don't think he'd want to do that, but that'd be fantastic. Yeah, he's smart, right?
Yeah.
But let me ask you, being 20, where do you want to be when you're 30? And let's stick it right there at 30. Like, do you have any idea where you want to be at 30, or what you want your life to look like? And do you have any idea beyond that, goals wise?
No. I think that's something I'm trying to continuously, find. I think that we overly focus on goals. Do you know who Eric Jorgensen is? He wrote the Almanac of Naval Ravikant.
No, I never heard of it.
I was speaking with him yesterday. It's a book I'll recommend to every single human.
Can you say the book title one more time?
The Almanac of Naval Ravikant.
Interesting name.
It's an amazing book, and there's really two parts of it. It's wealth and happiness. And the reason I bring that up is he was speaking about it, where he wrote that book. He took 3 years of his life to really synthesize someone else's life. And he's going into this next year without setting any goals. Like, if you're an ambitious person, you are going to move forward in what you want to move forward in, because that's just like our automatic response is to take action rather than to sit with your thoughts and like allow yourself to actually take a pause. I think a lot of us struggle putting our foot on the brake rather than putting our foot on the gas. And so if you're going to put your foot on the gas anyways, all I really care about is having a direction. Like, I see goals as guidelines. Like, yeah, I'll shoot for goals. This is where I'd like to be. But if I'm not there, that's okay, because life is going to get in the way. And so I try not to set goals for even 3 years down the road, because it just takes me away from like the everyday kind of mindset. It's like for the podcast, for example. And I think you think of this the same way. It's like a lot of people look at companies as like, okay, I'm trying to get to an exit so that I can then, enjoy my life and experience the fruits of my labor. But if you think of that in a podcast sense, getting to the end that's the worst part. Why would I ever want to end it? Like, I want to do it every single week. That's what I enjoy doing. And so I look at life the same way. Is like, yeah, I'd like to get somewhere where I can have all this freedom, etc. But it's like, I have that now, and let me sit in that and mix that in. And so like in a few months from now, I've been talking about how I want to travel and just haven't made it a priority. So in January, February, March, I'm probably going to travel in Europe somewhere. Like, I haven't decided where, but that's the whole purpose, is like really just allow myself to not know and just do it anyway. Like, in everything that I've done in my life, I've taken on more than I can handle, and I've just figured it out. And I think that's a good gauge for just seeing what you're capable of and what is possible and what life can come. And I think that not having such a rigid mindset of like where I'd like to be or this path I'm trying to be on is how you live your best life.
It's fantastic advice. You set a goal, but then you get to the goal, and what do you do next? You set a new goal.
Yeah.
Right. It's that space in between where the enjoyment happens. And people say it's all about the journey. And, you know, some people crap on that. Like even Grant Cardone's like, it's not about the journey. It's about the result. It's about the result. And like, I see both sides, and I understand he's trying to be very polarizing when he says things like that. But look at Joe Rogan. I'm a huge Joe Rogan fan, #1 podcast in the world. The man did his podcast for 10 years, just speaking with friends and only speaking to people that he wanted to talk to, which is still what he does. And he didn't have any success with his podcast until 10 years after he started. And he already had some air of celebrity before he started the podcast. So I do the podcast because I love talking to people. I love to host this type of environment. And I love talking to family and friends afterwards about the cool people that I've gotten a chance to speak to on the podcast. Like there's so many different reasons I love to do this, and I can't see an end to it. Right. So I don't specifically have a necessary goal, but like, as an example, I do know that I eventually want this podcast to be virtual and in person. I want to have a nice in-person setup. I want to fly people out. I want to go hiking with them in the Adirondacks, bring them to dinner, do fun things like that, and really make it more of an experience than it is. So I have guidelines for what I want, but I don't have an end post of where I want it to go. So I think that's fantastic advice. And like you said, man, like I had goals when I was your age, which I hate that phrase, by the way. When I was your age, I've been saying that a lot lately.
You're young too, man.
It's funny because like when I look at you though, it's like 10 years, man. Like when I was 20, my life looked completely different. And I couldn't even have imagined that I'd be where I am right now when I'm 20. And I know that that's going to be the case with you because like you said, life happens, and it happens in great ways, by the way. Beautiful things will happen, and there will be challenges, and we learn from those challenges, and we come out the other side. And then you look back at who you were when you're 20 and you don't even recognize that person. Yeah. So let me ask you though, because you talk a lot about self-sabotage specifically. So I'm curious because there's a lot of different topics you could talk about. You talk to people who are experts in all the areas of life. Why is this topic of self-sabotage something that you love to speak about? What's its meaning to you?
I think for me at my core, and I'm still trying to figure out the best messaging to explain it, because self-sabotage, maybe it resonates with some people, maybe it doesn't resonate with other people. And so I'm trying to figure that out as we speak. But I think the reason that it resonates so much is that so many people, and it's like realizing this throughout life, like you said earlier, you didn't get into this self-development, this personal space until later in your life, right? And I've seen that time and time again. I was on a featuring on a podcast yesterday where she didn't get it to it until she was 37. And it's like most people are going through their life sleeping, right? Not really being aware of the ways that they're getting in their own way, the things that they really like, the fears that they need to address. And just a lot of people are going through life in an unsettling place because they're unconsciously self-sabotaging. They're getting in their own way without even knowing it. They're playing small. They're playing to not lose rather than playing to win. And I see that time and time again for people. And so when I started working with clients, for example, there was one client I worked with, and she was a 43-year-old woman. She had a massive business. And she chose to work with me when I was 18 years old. Made no sense to me. But I was like, I know I can help this person. She felt that energy, and we started working together. She already had a massive business, and what she wanted to do was, after 9 years of thinking about making a book, she just was terrified to put herself out there, do the marketing, put herself into Barnes and Noble and get on Amazon and do all the things because she was afraid of success. She was afraid of what it would look like if she actually did succeed. And so I see this time and time again. And something that really resonated with me was one of my first coaches told me that you do a disservice by not bringing your unique gifts into the world. And that resonated so much with me to the extent that I truly believe that everyone's one of one, right? That no one has the same DNA. I don't care if you're a twin or if you're not a twin or whatever it looks like. No one has the same DNA. No one can bring what you can bring into the world. And so if that's a fact, no one can bring what you can bring into the world, then so many people are not bringing what they can bring into the world because whether they don't believe that they're capable of it, they don't believe that they should, they don't believe they're worthy. There's so many reasons. They're fearful. And so what I want to get down to the core is helping people bring out what they can bring into the world and actually pursue something that they really genuinely want to pursue. Step out of what they're comfortable with and step into the unknown, because your brain's going to try to revert back to what you do know. But if you're unsettled with what you do know, then something has to change. And sometimes that fear is just so paralyzing that we can never really make that change.
Let me ask you this. I now understand that it doesn't matter how old you are, you can help people of any age.
Oh, yeah.
Although I didn't used to have that belief. when I joined the National Speaker Association. It was actually before I joined. I was just a guest at their Connecticut chapter meetings because that's the chapter closest to us. And I was in there. I'm dressed in a full suit and tie, and I'm the youngest guy in the room. Everyone else is in their 50s, 60s, even up from there.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh my God, who am I to be in this room? Like, these people, I have nothing in common. At least I thought I have nothing in common with them. Like, what can I provide in value to them? Are they going to even want to talk to me? And I'm all nervous and anxious. And I've achieved some success in my life at this point. Like, I was doing very well in many, many different areas. I'm fit at this point, and I'm really asking, how can I grow this speaking business? How can I grow this podcast business? And I remember talking to one of the guys in the room who's in his 60s. And I said to him, I was like, yeah, but the thing is, like, I'm too young to be taken seriously. And he looked at me and he's like, what are you talking about? And he was like, almost like taken aback by me saying that. And I was like, well, I'm only 24. I was like, how would anyone take me seriously at 24, especially all of you? He's like, Brandon, not one time in the 10 minutes that we've been talking have I thought about how young you were. He's like, that's something that only exists in your mind.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, is that true? And that started to dissolve the belief. And then I went to a Tony Robbins event where he actually had a practice of taking old beliefs and replacing them with new beliefs. And it's a simple exercise that we've probably read about in books, but that environment made it very real for me. And I was like, I got to let this idea that I'm too young go.
Mhm.
And ever since I let that idea go, beautiful things have happened for me, because that thought of, am I too young to achieve something? And by the way, people in their 30s think this, people in their 40s think this. Like, it's not just something that people in their 20s and before that think about. So I'm curious with you, when you had that client who was much older than you and you're 18 years old, did you ever have that thought of, am I too young to help this person? And I guess we'll start there. Did you ever have that thought? Did it ever come to mind?
Absolutely. And I'd love to dive in on this because this is a topic that it makes me laugh now, because I remember when I was 17 and I was working, I think I probably just turned 18 when I worked with her. 43-year-old woman, had a massive ATM business, like living in California, doing all the things that like I seen as like success. And she just didn't see herself as successful. And so seeing that, we would hop on calls. And I think the thing that I've always been told, I have an old soul. And at the time when I was 17, 18 years old, the only thing that was going through my mind was like, who am I kind of thing? Who am I to be a coach? Who am I to do all these things? And a big reframe for me was, when you're a coach, a lot of people expect you to have all the answers. And what I like to say is that when I'm a coach, I don't have the answers. I just ask really good questions. And I think that at its core, that's what it is, because again, it's like you ask yourself different questions. A lot of the time, what coaches do, for example, is a client will come into the call and they'll have all of the limiting beliefs in the world. They're going to tell a story about why they can't do the thing, why they didn't take action on what they said they wanted to take action on. And I'm going to be there just to call them out. I'm just going to call you out on your bullshit. If I'm okay to swear on this,
Yeah.
I'm just going to call you out on your bullshit. And it's funny because I remember another client where he would always come on and he would just try to tell a story and why he didn't do what he said he was going to do, or why he was too fearful of whatever it was. And before I even said anything, he would just laugh and just call himself out and be like, I know that you're going to say that's bullshit, because it's true. And it's like, that's what a coach is supposed to do, is not have all the answers. I don't have any answers. Like, you have the answers. I'm just here to bring them out of you. It's like, I'm wringing all of the answers out of you. So when I joined the coaching program that I joined at 17, I had invested around $10,000 into myself. At 17, I had no idea what I was doing, man. Like, I just knew I wanted to help people, and this felt like the right thing to do. And I was the youngest person in that coaching program. To this day, I'm still the youngest person that ever went through that. And so at the time, I thought it was a limiting, like the limiting belief was that I am too young, kind of thing, like you said. And now I look back and I think, man, I wish I could be 17 again. I wish I could be 18. Like that's such an advantage. Being young is such an advantage. Like I said, I just turned 20 and I'm like, okay, now I'm not a teen. And the older I get, the more that I think about, man, like when I was younger, it probably made me stand out even more. And so that's the perspective that I take on it. It's really the story that you tell yourself is what's going to manifest what you want or what you don't want, is the story that you tell yourself at the end of the day.
It's so true. It's so interesting, especially when someone young is in a room with people who aren't. That in itself is like a unique selling proposition, just the fact that you are really young. But when you are really young, at least for me, like I mentioned in that story, you're thinking the complete opposite.
Yep.
So again, it was a story that I told myself. So when you're working with people, and even when you in the past have self-sabotage, or we're on the brink of it, or we're in a pattern of it, it's again a story that we're telling ourselves, but sometimes that story's subconscious.
Mhm.
So how do we work through these stories that we tell ourselves so that we can change the narrative, especially if it's something that we're not aware of?
Yeah, I think that's why I think coaching is so powerful. Like, it's a big reason I became a coach was because I seen the power in it. I think like you said, it's difficult to interrupt a story that you're unaware is going on. And so for coaching, it's like you have an external perspective. There's really two things that I think a coach would give you. It's clarity and it's accountability. So if you're not aware of like what's getting in the way, a coach is going to ask you the questions to immediately bring up the fears that you are really likely not addressing. You're going to continue moving forward. And something I see with clients is like, okay, I'm going to work as much as I can. More work equals more results, but it's not true, right? You have to work on the right things. That's going to equal more results. And so, really asking the right questions is such a powerful thing. Like it's as simple as just asking the question, like I said earlier, is instead of asking how is this or why is this happening to me? How is this happening for me? It's going to give a different answer. When you have a coach there and is asking you the tough questions that you don't ask yourself, well, it's going to bring up a lot of things, a lot of fears and a lot of anxieties and a lot of things that you haven't addressed yet. And so when you have that and then you pair it with accountability to actually take the action, because information is nothing without implementation, it's insane what can happen. And I'll give the example. That client that I worked with, the 43-year-old woman, she went from having an idea of a book for almost a decade, about 8 to 9 years. We worked together for 6 months, and within 6 months, she got nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. She was in Barnes and Noble. She was in Amazon. She was everywhere that she wanted to be, and she was in Barnes and Noble doing events for her book and doing all of these different things because it was just addressing those fears, realizing that those fears are a story that you're telling yourself, really actualizing, is this what I really want? Because she was fearful of success, of taking on it, because the next level is going to mean more work, and that's just the reality of it. So, do you really want that next level? Addressing, realizing that that is the thing that she wants to do, holding her accountable to take the action to actually make it happen. Within 6 months, it could have happened years and years and years ago, but it was the pairing of the really intentional questions and the intentionality behind the action that you want to take. And so much can happen in such a short amount of time. I've seen it time and time again. You can genuinely change your life within 3 to 6 months if you're intentional about making it happen. But
Yep.
if we're not aware of it, then we just stay stuck in a cycle. And that's why I'm so passionate about this kind of stuff, because I've just seen it within myself, within clients that I've worked with, and everything in between.
To summarize what you just said, having someone to help guide you through that time
Yeah.
is how you move through it. And you said two specific things. Work with someone because they ask you the right questions. So of course it's great to find someone who does know what questions to ask, because I've seen a lot of coaches who don't at the
Yeah.
same time. And you're fantastic. Just from what you shared already, I can tell you're an amazing coach, but it's not always the case, right? And the second step is accountability to that newfound clarity that you've brought forth with questions. So who coaches you? Who coaches the coach? Where do you find your inspiration from so that you can then help inspire and lead the clients that you work with?
Yeah. I think I don't remember who I heard it from, but I find coaching as like a cheat code in life. It's like in everything that I'm doing, I have a fitness coach, I have a business coach, I have a mindset coach. Like in everything that I'm doing, I have a coach in, because I'm gonna excel faster. It's
Yeah.
like the way that I think about it is you either spend in time or you spend in money. One is infinite, the other is finite. Money is infinite. It's literally being printed every single day.
Yeah.
Your time is every single second you get older and you have less time. And so if I can spend the money and I can do it and I can have a shortcut to getting to where I want to go, well, that just seems like the obvious answer. But a lot of people have an attachment to money. They're afraid of spending money. They're afraid of investing into themselves. And from that first investment into myself, I seen how much could change. And so I'm always trying to do that. And another part of that is the podcast, man. Like I'm literally like, I'll read a book and then I speak with a person that I just read their book, and I get to ask the questions that I would want to ask. Like I had
Yep.
Dr. Benjamin Hardy on the podcast a little bit ago. His episode comes out next week, I believe.
Hey, what book was he? What book did he write?
He wrote many. He wrote The Gap and the Gain. He wrote 10x is easier than 2x. He wrote
Because I know his name from somewhere. I think I've read one of his books.
he just came out with this book not too long ago.
Okay.
10x is easier than
Nice.
2x.
Yeah, nice cover art. I like that.
Best-selling author. And like I've read his books for years. I got to speak with him a few weeks ago to ask him the questions that I would want to ask him. And so I'm literally learning from the people that I would want to learn from anyways. So that's a part of it as well. But I really think the importance of a coach is investing in yourself. A lot of people see it as like, oh, I have to give this person money, but I see it as like, if I didn't spend money, I wouldn't take it seriously. People that pay attention, right? Like, I think if you don't put skin in the game, well, then nothing's going to change. And that's why I've never worked with anyone for free, is because you're not going to make a change if you really don't like put it down, put yourself, really invest into it, into yourself. That's what really changes. I think when you invest into yourself, you commit like you never have before. So you end up getting results like you never have before.
Yeah.
Like when I made that first initial investment into myself to like step into learn how to become a coach and understand what that even was, I was terrified. Like to this day, I still don't remember. I cannot express the anxiety that I had when I first put that $2,500 payment, the first investment down. It was like,
Same.
this was more than I made this month at Dick's Sporting Goods. I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, but that was what made it happen. It was like taking on more than I can handle, and everything changed from there.
It's so funny because 2,500 was the first investment I made in myself too. First time I ever spent money aside from books, which are $20, but that was the first time I ever bought a course. And it was the Knowledge Business Blueprint by Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi. And this was in 2019. I had nothing going on, never even created my first video or anything yet. It was about how to create a knowledge business. And without investing that $2,500, this podcast wouldn't exist. The business wouldn't exist the way that we know it now. Like so many things wouldn't exist if I didn't invest that money. But let me tell you, there was a lot of fear behind investing that money. And, I was making much more than that. And there was still that fear. And I remember I was afraid to tell my wife, like, hey, I just spent $2,500 on a course. And I did tell her, because I've learned through experience, let your significant other know what purchases you were making. Right. So I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I'm going to be spending some time going through this course. And she's like, oh, that's cool. And she's like, what course is it? And she's like, oh, cool. How much was that? And I was like, it was $24.97, right? Saying it like that. So 2,500 sounds a lot more than $24.97. And she was like, okay. She's like, do you think that that's going to help you to do what you're looking to do faster? And I said, yeah, I know it will. And she's like, okay, cool. She's like, I'm proud of you for making that investment in yourself. And I was like, wow, having her support was huge. But going through that immediately from the first module, I was like, I've gotten the value out of this course. Like, I know that this was the right move to make. And even working with my first one-on-one coach in 2021, I started working with my first one-on-one coach. And without them, this podcast wouldn't exist. This was a recommendation like, hey, you love to talk. You love to speak with interesting people. You listen to podcasts. And he was like, why don't you have a podcast? What if you did something like that? And I was like, that's a really good idea. And here we are. So again, that investment in yourself, even if, so again, I'm not being a proponent for necessarily the bad coaches out there. And when I say bad, I shouldn't say bad, because I think they all have great intentions, but sometimes they don't have the toolbox and the skills. And I think even investing in a coach that doesn't necessarily have all the skills is better than not investing in a coach at all, so that you can find the right coach. Sometimes you don't find the right coach the first time, but again, you just got to find the person that you resonate with. So if you're listening to this and you resonate with James, be sure to go check out James. Be sure to check out his podcast, the You Can Too podcast. Links are in the descriptions, and we'll specifically talk about what it looks like to work with you. But I'm curious to know this, and this is more of a personal question, but do you ever have, when you, as an example, you gave the example of Ben Hardy, and you've spoken to a lot of great people who most people would know the names, like you've spoken with Evan Carmichael on your show, you've spoken with a lot of great people. Do you ever have fear to reach out to these people, that they might say no when you reach out and say, hey, do you want to be on my show? Like, what does that look like when you're reaching out to these people who are many steps ahead of you?
No, absolutely not. That never made sense to me, realistically. Like, I think of it as like, if you knew that you had to go through 33 no's and the 34th was going to be a yes, you'd certainly do it, because you know that you're going to go through all those no's to get to that yes. Most people are going through life never asking the first one, so they never get to the yes. I always think of it like, I spoke with Seth Godin a few months ago. That made no sense to me that I was able to speak with Seth Godin, like a 21 international best-selling author, one of the biggest people in this space, and most people, if I say his name, they'll know who he is. I spoke with him. There was fear getting on the podcast, because there was an imposter syndrome of like, am I really able to speak with this person? And we talked about our imposter syndrome on that podcast. But no, I think of it like, people shoot too small because they don't think that they can get bigger guests on their show. I'm going to shoot big because I don't know if I can get bigger guests on my show. So it's like, you're not going to know if you don't ask. I've had so many people reach out to me of like, how have you been able to get big guests on your show? And it's like, I do exactly what you're thinking. I'm just doing it and you're thinking about doing it.
Wow.
I just reach out. And I remember vividly, someone asked me a few weeks ago, like, how are you able to get big guests on the show? And I literally said, I just reach out. That it is that simple. And I think of this in most things in life. It's simple. It isn't easy, but you just have to do it. And I'm always trying to find a book I'll recommend to people is The Third Door by Alex Banayan. The
The
Third Door.
Third Door.
The Third Door by Alex Banayan. And
Okay.
it's a great book that I'd recommend to a lot of people. It's a page turner, is what I like to say. That'll just keep you inspired with like you can get in rooms that you didn't think you could get in. And I think me being naive about it was just like I don't know if I can, so I'm going to do it. Put me in that position to be able to do it. And so I think people need to be more naive. It's like it's not smarts. It's just like just being bold and putting myself out there, really.
So let me ask you, let's say you read my book and you say, wow, I really want to have Brandon on the podcast, but Brandon's a really busy guy. He's doing all these things. He's many steps ahead, maybe 21 international New York Times bestseller, whatever it is. What does the process in a minute or two or less, what does the process look like in order to get me on your show? And let's say I don't respond right away. Let's say you message me, I never respond. What does it look like?
That's fine. So the reason I brought up The Third Door is because I'll give you the really breakdown of what it is. There's the front door, there's the back door, and then there's a side door. Most people go in the front door. Maybe a few will go in the back door, but there's not really anyone going in that side door. Like there's not really people don't even know about it, so they don't go through it. So for you, like I can first look on your Instagram, and if your Instagram, if you don't answer my DM, I can stand out by sending a voice memo instead of a text. That's probably gonna be it's gonna be a little bit more personal. You're actually gonna be able to tell my energy that I really care about people. You know, I put in the research. I can say that I've had over 190, close to 200 episodes. So it shows like for Seth Godin, you need to have over 100 episodes for him to like actually go on your show. He was coming out with a book at the time. I said, well, let me help you promote this book. I've been over 100 episodes easily, and I really care. So I'm going to put in the effort. I'm not going to just have you on and not have any notes or not put any effort in. So I'm actually going to care.
Yep.
So say you don't answer on Instagram. Maybe you don't. You have LinkedIn, like you said. We've discussed that. So I can reach out on LinkedIn. I can reach out on Twitter. I can go to your website if you have a website and find your email. Maybe there isn't a way for that. So maybe I reach out to your assistant. Maybe I find a way through there. Like you have to think of like, what's the third door? What's the way that most people aren't going to go through? And that's the path that you can go through. But it's funny because it usually is even the first door that people just don't go through. And so you're never going to get there. There's no secret path. It's just literally doing it. It really is just doing it. Like people don't see me reaching out to 5 people every single day. You know what I mean? So it's just putting in the reps and just doing it every day. And you'd be surprised. I think people don't let's say for a podcast, for example, people don't get the guests that they want because they don't reach out to the guests that they want because they don't think it's possible. Like Evan Carmichael was so much easier than people would think. Seth Godin answered my email faster than anyone has ever answered my email.
Wow.
And people just don't reach out. It really is that simple. And I say that, but it's like I wish I could show you that he answered in like minutes, man. It was crazy.
That's amazing. You're an inspirational guy, brother. Let me say that.
I appreciate that.
You've inspired me, like 100%. 10 years older, I'm inspired. So I thank you for that personally. I can't wait to connect with you on a personal level.
Absolutely.
I'd like to ask you, in the almost 200 podcast episodes that you've done, what is it that all of your most successful guests, like what is it that all of your guests have in common? Like, is there a common theme that every single one of them says, or most of them say that when you hear it, you're like, oh, the last person said that, the last person said that. What do your most successful guests have in common from your experience?
I think the thing that comes up for me, and it could be, there's two things. One is a real curiosity. I think for a lot of people, the reason that they don't create a life that they love is because they're not curious enough to see what it could actually be like. Like they're so focused on the worst possible outcome of what they think life is supposed to be like that they never question like what could happen if it was like if my life really could be everything that I wanted it to be. You know, I grew up in a place of scarcity, single mother, and so I grew up, you know, with the victim mindset. Like life is happening to me. I'm gonna have to live a job that I don't love. But that never made sense to me. I'm like, there has to be more than this. If someone else can do it, it's the whole reason that you can too mindset is like, if someone else can do it, I'm probably capable. At least, and there's probably a possibility. Maybe it's not that thing, but maybe it's another thing. It's like I said earlier. It's like we all have a unique gift. You might not know what that unique gift is, but lean into the things that you're curious about. I had Light Watkins on my show. He's a spiritual meditation teacher and best-selling author. He's done amazing things. And the thing that he spoke about that I think is so important for people to understand is that you find your purpose by exploring your curiosities. You know, everyone's looking for the purpose, but just explore things that you're curious about and your purpose is going to find you. And when we really lean into that and we allow ourselves to be curious about like, what would happen if I wrote this book? What would happen if I started this podcast? What rooms could I get into? What things could open up for me if I was curious enough to just let my mind wonder of what could be possible? And that wonder of like what could really be possible, like we fall away from dreaming and really thinking big. And this is such a big part of what I want to help people do is think bigger, because we think so small. It's like if you shoot for a small goal, that you don't get enough motivation to actually go towards that goal because you're not really inspired by it. But if you think 10 times bigger than what you could actually accomplish and what you think you could accomplish, even if you didn't hit that, you're still going to be higher than you would have been if you shot for a lower goal. And so thinking in that lens, that starts with curiosity. The other thing that I would like to point out is a mindset shift around failure. A lot of people see failure as final. A lot of people see failure as a part of themselves. If I fail, I'm the failure, etc. The reframe that I've changed it is failure is feedback.
Mm.
If I see it as feedback, I'm going to seek it, because then I want to get as much feedback as I can. It's like that no, you get to yes. I'm going to do it as much as I can. I'm going to seek that failure so I can learn from it, see it as a learning opportunity. I'm going to get better from it. If I had someone on the podcast and I seen it as a failure, well, what did I do wrong? How can I, so next time I have a podcast, I can not make that mistake. And so instead of seeing failure as final or a part of who you are, see it as something that you should actually seek and seek out for. It's like the people that are most successful invite discomfort and actually seek the discomfort. Like it's like going to the gym. Like no one feels like going to the gym, but most of the most successful people in the world care about their physical health and they put themselves in position to actually seek those things. Like you don't want to do it, but you're going to do it. So I would say those two things come up for me.
That's amazing. Let me ask you, what does it look like for someone to work with you? And for someone maybe who hasn't had a coach before, what can they expect by working with you as their personal coach?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, I think the two things that I can make it like for people that don't even know what a coach is, it's clarity and accountability. If you feel like you've been wanting to go towards a goal, maybe you're just unsettled with your current life. Maybe you just don't feel good about yourself when you're by yourself and you just want to make a shift in your life. Working with me usually looks like 3 to 6 months of just intensive every single week. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that you have probably been avoiding. I'm going to really bring up a lot of the fears and a lot of the goals that you actually want to go towards. And I'm going to hold you accountable to making it happen. A lot of people just get in their own way because whether they don't believe it's possible, I always say that belief drives behavior. And if you don't believe you can do something different, well, you're not going to behave in ways to make it happen. And so a quote that I like to bring up is that sometimes we just need someone to believe in us more than we believe in ourselves. And I think that that's such a thing that with coaching is like, if you really want to do something, stop wasting your life putting it off, because you can have that thing, or you can at least move in that direction towards that thing. But if we don't believe it's possible, then we're never going to make that shift. So that's what I would say.
Excellent answer. There's so many things I want to ask you, man. So I know that there's a round 2 in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we just don't have the time for it. But I can't wait until we have you back on, because there's so many questions I haven't asked you. We've taken this in a lot of interesting directions. You are an old soul. And one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what do you think it means when people call you an old soul? Because people have called me that too. And I've asked myself the question, why do they call me that? And I think it comes down to curiosity. And I feel like a lot of people who are young like to talk about them. And it's very clear that you love to ask people about themselves. And when I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of the first personal development books I read, be more interested in other people than you are about yourself, right? And you are very much the epitome of that. And I ask everyone listening, you got to go check out James's podcast, the You Can Too podcast. It's fantastic. I listened to a few episodes, and I want to dive into the 20 things you learned from 20 years of living. That's the next one I want to listen to. But you're an inspirational guy, James. You are very charismatic, energetic, and I can tell you're a fantastic coach. So if you're listening and you've resonated with James as well, be sure to go to the links in the description to check out James. James, where's the best place for people to reach out to you personally?
Yeah, I would say Instagram at James Brackin IV, JamesBrackinIV. Everyone thinks it's EN because that's how Brackin's spelled sometimes, but that's the best place that you can find me for sure is Instagram, I would say.
Excellent. So we'll put your Instagram in the description for people to easily go down there and check it out. But James, it's a pleasure meeting you, and I can't wait to actually meet you in person really soon, I hope. Like, we got to make that happen. I'll reach out to you. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show, brother, and I wish you nothing but the best, and you don't need my wishes. You're going to get there, and I'm just super excited to see what you accomplish, brother.
Man, I'm grateful to be here. I'm looking forward to part 2. I'm looking forward to connecting in person. You're doing absolutely profound things, and so grateful I reached out because I love what you're doing, and I think we're gonna have a great relationship moving forward, brother. Thank you.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you. This has been a really uplifting conversation for me personally. And if it's been that way for me, then I know hopefully it's been the same way for you when it comes to this idea of self-sabotage and how it ties into our personal narrative and the stories that we tell ourselves, and maybe these limiting beliefs that we may hold, like the one that I held that I shared about believing I was too young to do something. Right. And we dove into how to set goals. We dove into the importance of looking ahead and how it's important, but at the same time, not important, and the dichotomy between those two. We've gone to a lot of different places in 51 minutes, which is super cool. So I hope that you took something out of this conversation. Be sure to go to the description, check out James's Instagram, and the link is right down there. And we'll also post a link to the You Can Too podcast for Apple and Spotify and all the other places you can find that. So be sure to go check that out. If you love this conversation, you'll love listening to James's podcast as well. If you took something away from this conversation with James, please share this show with just one other person who could use it as well. You're the reason our show has grown the way it has over the past 2 years, because you are the best part of the Be Better team. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until we talk again next time, continue to be better.